and Jigba had a drop on him, and that is going to score 2, and the Mud Hens tie the game. And now the ball gets away from the home plate area, and on to third base goes Malloy.
All right, welcome to week 7 of the Tiger Minor League Report recap podcast here at Tigers MLReport.com. Rogelio Castillo alongside me is Chris Brown. I know it sounds weird. We're doing it Monday at noon, but the advantages of working from home, A, and B, yesterday started off bowling. Like I haven't bowled in the league in a long time, so I just wanted to make sure that the first time out, I wasn't going to, and I ended up finishing right around the time we were to start the podcast anyways, but I just wanted to make sure we had enough time and we weren't rushing through anything. Cause it's been kind of a strange week involving a couple players because we've seen some trends where it's very polarizing trends, but we'll get to all that shortly. And the Tigers kick off a series with the Kansas City Royals tonight, starting at 7:40, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And of course, the weekend series where the Jeimer Candelario World Revenge Tour. We'll talk about a little bit about that. But if you have not, please go to our Patreon, Tigers Minor League Report. You see the address right there across the screen. If you're watching us on YouTube, if you're not, if you're listening to the podcast, first and foremost, thank you. We had our best month since we started doing this. So thank you for downloading and participating. And if you want to go to there's a PayPal link on it if you want to donate, or if you're watching us on YouTube, please participate in super chats. So, but Chris, this was a busy week as far as getting clips goes across the board, wasn't it?
Yeah, Tuesday in particular was just a wild day. I mean, you did the cool Tower of Power tracker thing at the end of the night. They got big performances from almost every prospect in the system, at least on the offensive side. It was kind of wild. Kind of petered off after that, but there were still some big performances. We're going to get another Player of the Week winner. So yeah, it was a fun week, at least in terms of the individual performances. None of the teams had a particularly good week, though, unfortunately.
Yeah, Erie, again, it's one of those things where we're looking at Erie, the inconsistency of Erie pitching period in general, but even to a certain extent the hitting side of things, because there was Colt Keith had a really good week, but came on. There was a period of time where he struggled.
Sorry, the comment there from Sir Dusty. Thought I was going to miss the stream, but I'm stuck in line at the Secretary of State. We're just saying I'm lucky being stuck here. Hey, as long as hopefully we can make it not so bad while you're waiting to get your photo taken or something. I don't know.
Yeah, that's
tags renewed.
Well, I will you know what though? I think the Secretary of State, I think Futurama captures it very well in terms of like bureaucracy and waiting for things, and yeah, it's always, especially when you think I'm going to book online, I'm going to get there ahead of time. Nope, you still have to wait in line. It's almost like they are purposely going, we're going to test your patience because you need to get a tab done or whatever.
I've only ever lived in Michigan, so but I've always heard, I think the DMV is basically the equivalent of the Secretary of State in other states, right?
Right.
I don't know how they split it up everywhere, but yeah, it's never a pleasant experience for just about anybody. So sorry, Sir Dusty, but hopefully we can keep you entertained for a little bit. But anyway, yeah, you were talking about Colt Keith, who was good this week. He's going to win an award. We can get to his stats a little bit later, but
oops, that's the wrong one.
Yeah, that's all right. But yeah, so none of the teams were better than 500 this week, even though there were some outstanding performances, and it's just it's kind of indicative. Really, the problem across the board was, well, at least down until Lakeland, was pitching. The pitching just wasn't quite up to snuff this week.
Yeah, it was I mean, there is some individual pitching performances, but most notably, I think the best team this week, as far as pitching went, was West Michigan. As again, it's a really good look. Great Lakes is probably the best team they faced all season. I mean, that's a team that's just built. It's just built with prospects. They have a lot of talented pitching prospects too, as well. But I thought they held their own, even on the Garrett Burt. After we watched Garrett Burhan struggle last week, he came in and had a really good start. But yeah, it's more individual pitching performances. Erie had some, again, even with, it's funny, for all the struggles with their bullpen has been pitching better as of late. It's just the offense, like it's just the starting rotation again.
Yeah, it I don't know. We can get into it a little bit more as we're going through, but there seems to be something going on at Erie this year, and I don't know. It could just be one of those things, like we saw with the Tigers all last year, where just nothing worked out. But to see basically everyone in Erie regress except for Brent Herter is just bizarre. Like everybody has taken a step back this year. Even like Ty Madden had an awesome first start. He hasn't come close to that in any outing since. So yeah, I don't know what's going on there. If it's, like I said, prospects, it's a bumpy ride with prospects, right? But we can get to that a little bit more once we get into Erie. But
yeah,
starting with Toledo. Toledo went out to Omaha, where it's generally seems to be a pretty good place to hit, and we got bounce back weeks from a couple of big prospects.
Yeah, and there was what it was interesting. We were just talking about Andre Lipsius last week. I feel like we had this conversation where we were saying, oh, it's just he's going to pick it up one of these weeks soon. And I feel like because that's what happens with him. And you've highlighted this before, Chris. He's a very streaky hitter. He'll go through bouts of not hitting, and then he'll just when you try to count him out, he'll just come up and have a week like he did, 10 for 24, and make him really good hard contact. And he defensively, I mean, he's always been solid there defensively, but it was good to see him back on the schneid, if you will.
Yeah, and I don't know. Part of the issue, and I haven't checked the StatCast data for the last week, but part of his issue this year has just been really bad at ball profile. Just a lot of high fly balls, and he got those down a little bit to some more line drives this week, and also got some ground ball hits back up the middle, and that helps. I mean, the difference between 10 hits and 6 hits is maybe a little bit of luck, but yeah, I mean, it was the strikeouts weren't high, the walks were back in normal, so yeah, he just got back on track this week, and so did to a certain degree, so did Parker Meadows, who went I want to say 6 for 24, 6 for 20, 6 for 21, 2 doubles, 2 home runs. It was good to see. He's not had a great offensive start to the season.
Deep to left center field. Waters races back.
It's been
no.
Yeah,
that was the Lipsius home run to left center field right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, Lipsius and Meadows have been kind of the two underperforming prospects on that team this year, and they both had big weeks, which helps. Unfortunately, there wasn't a whole lot of supplemental help there. I mean, Jonathan Davis had a good week. He continues to play well. He's a veteran, but you want to see, what did he do? Yeah, 8 for 17, 2 doubles and a homer. The only other thing is Justin Henry Malloy didn't have a great week on offense, and he seems to be pretty key to them playing well. And since their hot start, whatever his last 3 or 4 weeks or whatever, he's really cooled off, and so has the team.
Yeah, they haven't won. I think they haven't won a series now. Going back, they've lost 3 series in a row, I believe. So, yeah, 3 series in a row. And what's interesting too is, so one of the things I was paying attention to this week was the additions to the bullpen. So the Tigers signed Seth Eldridge, Brandon Bristow, and Heath Hembry over the last few weeks or so. Out of all of them, Hembry had the best week. 2/3 innings, 1 hit, a walk, and a strikeout. So, but Seth Hemridge, who had some numbers, he was struggling when they signed him, did not look well in his debut. And same thing with Braden Bristow, who 4 walks, 4 strikeouts. And also the other, I forgot, Sam Clay, who had 5 strikeouts and 4 innings of work. But again, Omaha is, I mean, I think they had Drew Waters on rehab, and he was, I mean,
Yeah, he had
he was really
2
hitting the
homer
ball.
game and a double, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, Elledge actually came in and got a 1-2-3 inning last night, and then in his second inning didn't get a single out. It was a bummer. But yeah, the Omaha offense kind of put it to him this week, and really, like, to me, it was about the starting pitching this week. The big story was finally a good start from Reese Olson. Start that looked like he looked like last year. 5 innings, 1 hit, 2 walks, 9 strikeouts. You cut it up. He was good. His changeup was really effective. He looked like a solid pitcher again. But the rest of the rotation, 13 innings. They got 13 innings in the 5 other starts, and those starters give up 13 runs. It's kind of been that case all year long. The rotation in Toledo just is incredibly pedestrian, and it's almost like they're not even really trying to have starters there. Honestly, they've got guys that they had. Miguel Del Pozo had a shortened start before he hit the IL. Ashton Godot had 2 very short starts. It's just not, and I have to believe it's by design, right? We've talked about it before. It seems like you just want an army of potential long relievers there in Toledo to help the Tigers if they need it. So maybe that's it, but who knows? But yeah, it wasn't a great week for the Toledo pitching, and that's how you go 2-4. But the one thing I wanted to mention with Malloy, when we were talking about the hitting, he had a kind of a down week, but I just looked up his stats, right, and there's not a huge difference between his production or between his raw numbers in April and May. In April, he hit 344 with a 183 ISO and an 18% walk rate, which was good for a 163 WRC plus. Like, he was awesome. Everybody was loving it. This month in May, he's hitting 238, but the ISO is up to 206 and the walk rate is only down to 17%. The WRC plus is 112. So why the 50-point drop? His BABIP went from 438 last month to 316 this month. So maybe he's just was getting lucky in the first month. Maybe it's a little less hard contact this month. But yeah, it's we continue to get lots and lots of call him up. He's the answer type stuff on our Twitter feed, and he's been above average over the last month, but he hasn't been that sort of the game changer that maybe people hope he is.
Yeah, because I know a lot of people complain about Nick Maton being in the lineup. We did see that he did hit an off speed. He hit off speed this weekend in Washington, which was something he has not done. But as far as the rest of the offense goes for Toledo, you can hang your hat on the fact that you mentioned this earlier, how good of a week Parker Meadows had. He's hitting lefties better, which is a good sign. But then there's this kind of thought that him going down there has ruined all that momentum he had in spring training. But again, it's spring training. I don't take spring training serious.
No, it's nice to see things in spring training, but every team every spring has guys who like show out, and then when the games actually count, pitchers are starting to try to get them out. It's not that they don't in spring training necessarily, but they're also working on things. So we saw Lipsius have a big spring. We saw Meadows have a big spring. And we saw Maton have a big spring, right? And he struggled in the big league. So I think Parker Meadows is a guy who's had basically one good offensive year. It was last year. And he's doing a lot of things well. He's not striking out a ton. He's walking at a fair clip. He had a really great at bat the other night where people dug this on Twitter where they're still getting used to seeing the challenge system used in AAA. And it was a 10-pitch at bat, and he got called out on the 10th pitch, strike 3, and he instantly tapped his helmet. That's how they say, "Hey, I'm going to challenge," and he won the challenge. It was like, "Hey, screw you! I got my 10-pitch walk," and that kicked off the rally that helped them win the game.
Was that pitch was kind of high in the zone?
No, it was actually below the zone.
Oh, okay.
That one was. What's wild is you almost feel bad for these guys. Yesterday, Omaha, I stopped paying attention in like the 7th inning. Omaha had challenged 8 pitches yesterday and got 6 of them right.
Wow.
The ump was wrong 6 times out of 8.
Wow.
It's like, woo! That's a toughie. But you know what? Get it right? That's the hope.
Speaking of getting right, though, Reese Olson, one of the things about his start that I liked is that he went his changeup. He used his changeup more, I think, than he normally does, and that was a good pitch he was able to establish on the outside part of the corner, outside side of, on the outside part of the plate on the left on lefties, and he was doing that very well. And I thought that combination of I felt like when he had 2 walks, but the times he was almost getting ahead, he almost like kind of recomposed himself and then just went back to the changeup or even like the slider. Slider looked pretty good yesterday too. But what was most encouraging about his start was the fact it was efficiency, because Olson has had a lot of long innings, and you pointed out this yesterday. He worked in 2 innings of work, just 17 pitches, period.
Yeah, almost had an immaculate inning again. Yeah, it was nice to see him throwing strikes. The changeup has always been his best pitch in my mind. It's just a really, upper 80s, good movement, good deception. I think will be his best pitch going forward. But yeah, you want to see him have some success, because it's been a really rough first 6 or 7 starts for him. And so it's nice. I still think he's a reliever in the long run. He may, get a start here down the road, maybe even in the next couple of weeks, just by default, given what we've seen from, Joey Wentz has struggled a lot this year. And then you got Alex Faedo in there, and they may just need somebody to come up and try to give them innings. Now, I wouldn't expect a bunch of innings from him in his big league debut, but you never know, right? Sometimes you just have to try it. So that was a good step in the right direction. And we saw something similar from him last year. He struggled at times and then was able to figure some things out. But yeah, it's always good to see a nice, strong pitching performance like that, because his stuff really is good. The fastball is too hittable, but the main issue with him is just command. And if he can get the command a little bit better, then he can be more effective.
So we did get a question in our YouTube chat. From Emo Green. Does the player tapping the helmet trigger the review, or does it alert the manager to make that decision?
No, the players, it might be from a team thing, but they don't have very long. I think they only have a few seconds to make a decision. And so you'll either see the catcher do it, the hitter do it, or the pitcher do it. And once they do it, it just triggered. I don't think they can, talk over strategy with the manager. So you see some guys, some guys are just doing it at the worst time. Like, hey man, it would have been 1-1 if you didn't challenge that. Who cares? But yeah, it's I think it's instantly. As soon as the home plate ump sees it, he steps away and he triggers, and then they turn it. And the whole thing is pretty quick. It's like 30, 45 seconds tops. And yeah, it's fun to me.
No, I like it, because then you see the instant replay, and then they show that kind of like what you've seen on Foxcam, where they show the strike zone and where the pitch landed and why it was called or what was reversed.
It's the sort of technology we've been expecting them to use. It's been available in tennis for like 15 years, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, the players get to trigger it, and the most successful usually are the catchers. The catchers are the ones who have the best idea. But the hitters are doing better now too, so it's kind of fun.
It's funny. You mentioned how it was featured in tennis, but I remember first seeing it in Wimbledon, because I used to watch Wimbledon. It was like a summer thing, just whatever reason, get a bowl of cereal, watch Wimbledon in the morning.
Yeah.
And it was, but yeah, it was the first time I seen that kind of like that slow, where if it's foul or fair.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fairly common kind of like growing up with people our age, growing up and watching the Cubs and the Braves and stuff. I think something about Wimbledon. You're home from school in the summer. You're too young to have a job. There's nothing on TV except live tennis. You go, oh, all right, I'll watch this. Let's see what Jim Courier is up to today, or Goran Ivanisevic, or Boris Becker.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Boris Becker. I remember quite fondly. Pete Sampras, Steffi Graf, and Monica Salas, because she grunted so loud. That was a whole thing. Like just a
Jennifer Capriati, 13-year-old on the cover of Sports Illustrated, ladies and gentlemen.
And then she got and then she got into drugs and got all crazy, and then she came back, and
yeah. It's weird how forcing children into sports at a very young age at the highest level has negative effects on their lifestyle. But who knew? Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. Todd Marinovich.
They call him mechanical man. They call him mechanical? No, I know that's Charlie, the former Tiger.
I don't know what they.
I thought they had some sort of name for him. All right.
Anyways, one other thing I wanted to bring up briefly. Yesterday, Steele Walker got on base, and then he was trying to steal. He got picked off, and then like came up lame and had to leave the game. He was hurt, and I think they put him on the IL. Maybe they didn't yet, but that's something to keep an eye on because he just came back from the injured list, and that would open up a spot potentially for an outfielder to move up or another player to move around. So just something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and he had a hand injury. He got hit in spring training, and that's why he was out for a period of time beforehand. So
yeah, this one looked more like a quad or a hamstring or something.
The name is not indicative of him staying injury free. Anyway, that's stupid. All right, so let's go to Erie, and like we were mentioning earlier, Colt Keith had hit for the cycle, but he was overshadowed a little bit, and to a certain extent, by Grant Witherspoon, who's hidden in the last couple of weeks has been putting together a pretty strong run of offense. But I mean, Colt Keith, 13 for 25. I mean, that's ridiculous. That's video game like numbers. And he did have an error where I think Wednesday or was it Thursday's game? I can't remember, Thursday or Friday. And defensively, I mean, it's just that's probably the only thing about this week that he looks a little rough on.
I don't remember which one that was. He did have one where he kind of got a ground ball. It was a hard chopper and jumped up and grabbed it and then threw the ball away. I don't know if that was counted as an error or as a hit, but yeah, I mean, it was a monster week. It started off with one of the most amazing games you'll ever see. And people probably heard the stat, but no big leaguer has ever had a cycle where they went 6 for 6 with 2 home runs. It's never happened. There's only been 4 cycles in big league history with 6 hits. Now the minor league numbers are probably more than that just by virtue of that, but it's like a unicorn game, and it was crazy. He had a home run and a 3. I think it was a home run, right, and a 3-run triple in the first inning.
Yeah,
he had 5 RBI by the end of the first inning. And then had to finish the cycle with a double a single, 2 singles. So he was at one point he was 4 for 4 with 2 home runs, a double, and a triple, and then he had 2 singles at the end. And then, it was kind of pedestrian for the rest of the week. And then he hit home runs each of the last 2 games, too. And he also had a deep double yesterday.
It's hit deep to right, and this one is
showing the cycle in its entirety.
Yeah, and these, like, his hits are not cheapies, man.
Yeah.
Like, some of the singles are, but it's because he puts the ball in play. And he doesn't seem to be bothered by lefties. He's just a really good hitter, in the batted ball profile is almost ideal. Just a lot of hard contact in the air and plenty of it to the pull field, which is where you're going to do a lot of damage. But he also hit an opposite field home run the other day. So
that's a piece of hitting right there too.
Yeah, he's just a really good hitter. He'll chase a little bit up top, like with both fastballs and breaking balls, and sometimes you can get him to swing over a breaking ball below. But if you put it in the zone, you're playing with fire. Because he just attacks the ball, and he doesn't walk a ton, but it's enough right now, and he's not striking out a lot. So just a really impressive offensive performance this week. And yeah, like you mentioned, that was a shot. Poor Grant Witherspoon has his best week of the season. 10 for 20 or whatever, 4 doubles, 2 homers, walks more than he strikes out, steals a base, and he's just going to get completely overshadowed by Colt Keith, who I don't know when they're going to announce the Player of the Week award, but it will be his, I think.
I think probably in the next. Usually announce it right about now. Honestly, right? Usually early Monday afternoon, I believe, or maybe sometimes maybe it's Tuesday. I can't remember, but either way, Grant Witherspoon over the last 2 weeks has a slugging percentage over 829, and he's also. But the thing is too, he's walking a lot. I mean, he was striking out quite a bit, and now it's turned up to where he's walked 8 times to 9 strikeouts. That's a good, healthy ratio there for somebody who was struggling with that earlier. But 5 doubles over the last 2 weeks. And in addition to just, you talk about same thing with like Trey Cruz. Like I did an article on Trey Cruz. I thought it was important to highlight somebody else besides these two, because Trey Cruz, mind you, might not have in terms of a good week. I mean, he started the week pretty strong. He had 261. He's doing enough to keep himself in the lineup. And so I think that while the Colt Keith story is fantastic, it just, for once, it's it's a good thing. The Tigers have a problem with having 2 guys on the left side of the infield, because sometimes Cruz does play third, and then you have him Cruz at short, He also can play the outfield too. And so Witherspoon it's Erie, at least in that sense, on the offensive side of things, has enough hitting versatility that you can see one of these guys going up at Toledo at some point. I mean, Keith Wise, he might probably stay in Erie for a little longer, but either way, all three have continued to, in the last 2 weeks, been hitting with consistency.
Yeah. Now, and one thing we don't necessarily know about Scott Harris, what if he values guys being in what amounts to a pennant race, right? Because Erie is, even though they went 3-3, they're a half game out of first, I think, behind Richmond. So they're in the thick of a pennant race. If they think the Tigers can compete this year and they want to push Colt Keith, I can see them doing that. I don't know that based on what they've done so far, I don't know if they really think they can compete this year. But yeah, I mean, I would expect Keith to hang around Erie for another month or so until the first half playoff race is decided, and then he's up to Toledo or Detroit. But yeah, we don't really know yet. And one of the interesting things, and this is where we go back to, I'm glad you talked about Trey Cruz. You know, had a couple doubles, couple triples, 3 walks this week, where we go back to the idea of the organizations, the teams telling you what they think about the players without actually saying it, right? Just based on context clues. So not only is Trey Cruz playing a lot, he's hitting leadoff a lot. I think he got 4 leadoff hits this week.
Yeah.
And you just juxtapose that with a couple other players from the same draft class, the 2020 draft. Now, we actually, toward the end of last year, we thought that Trey Cruz was kind of falling out of favor. It seemed like, you know, he got promoted to AA, but it seemed like it wasn't he was barely playing, and it seemed like he got benched basically in the playoffs or toward down the stretch.
Yeah, we heard some things, in other words.
Yeah. And so, but there's a new guy in charge, and just look at, like I said, Cruz is not only is Cruz playing a lot, he's batting leadoff, but I was looking, so Cruz has 133 plate appearances this year. Daniel Cabrera has 95, and Gage Workman has 87. Cruz is getting much more playing time than these other guys. And actually, Cabrera and Workman's raw numbers are kind of better than they were last year, at least in terms of walk rate. But it seems like the new front office maybe has just decided that those guys can't hit, and they're not going to waste their time on guys who they don't think can hit. This is all inference for me, right? But I don't know what else you can think when they're not playing those guys and they're playing Trey Cruz. It's like, and it's not like Trey Cruz, like Jake Holton, I think, has the second or third most plate appearances on Erie.
Strikes here.
And that's because he's one of the few first basemen on the team, I think.
Right.
But like Cruz can play everywhere, and they're still playing him. But so can Workman. Workman has played all over the infield. They could probably throw him in the outfield if they want to, but they're giving Cruz the playing time. And I think that has to do with the change in leadership at the very top of what they value in players and who they think can help. So it's something to keep an eye on for the rest of the year, but it does just make me kind of reconsider some things about how Scott Harris is going to operate with the minor league stuff.
Yeah, and that's where one of the things I did ask Cruz was, because he had no, I guess he was talking about that he was going to play they asked him to play the outfield, and he had no idea that was going to happen coming in the spring until he got into spring training a little bit. And the fact is, I mean, we know he could because his father played outfield. His grandfather, Jose Cruz, who played for the Astros, was a great outfielder. And so it was not too far off the realm of possibility. But the fact is that some of the things he was talking about, what he did to his game to improve his game and his adjustments at the plate, you can see it here firsthand. I mean, if I slow it down a little bit, you look at his hands, they're still a little but they're down a little bit more. He's swinging on a higher plane. He talked about that too in the article you can find over on our website, because Trey Cruz is one of those players that you almost don't think about based off heading the season. It's kind of forgotten about, but I really think his numbers this year are really indicative of why perhaps they draft him in the first place. They see the power. We talked about this before. He's had power potential, but the ISO numbers, that's where it's like they're the biggest change among any of the players in the system, and it's not just like a one-time thing. It's been consistently throughout the year. Right, here we are about to end May, and he's still doing this at a high level, and that is definitely worth mentioning, because with Gage Workman, for example, Gage Workman over the last, I mean, he only had 8 play. He only had 8. I'm sorry, 8 at bats this week, and Cabrera had 9. And so, you can, there you go. What were you gonna say, Chris?
No, I mean, I think that's and yeah, but it was a great article. Really, I thought you did a great job. You got some good insight from him about what he changed about his swing, and yeah, I mean, I think it's important to keep an eye on that. And like you said, he didn't know that he was going to move to the outfield, and he took to it almost immediately. Like he's looked just fine out in center field. He can play all the positions now. I mean, you're talking about a guy who's can play all 3 outfield spots in 3 of the 4 infield spots, and he's got everything is kind of like a 45 to a 55, right? I mean, maybe the hit tool is a 40 or lower, but everything else is good enough that yeah, he looks like he's going to be an interesting piece going forward, just as a super utility guy. And if he's getting on base and showing power and some speed, there's value there. It's kind of a Nick Maton-ish player, honestly.
Yeah,
he's switch hitter too, so it's there's a lot to like there. But again, it was kind of we looked at him last year and he was producing at times, but it's like, I don't know about this swing. I don't know if this swing's going to work, and he's worked on it, and things have gotten better. So yeah, definitely a guy to watch for the rest of the season.
Now, Bruce Jane in our YouTube chat asked, the Whitecaps are tied for least runs allowed in the division. Erie's last division, most runs allowed. Is there a problem in Erie with the pitching coach? Well, I'll just say this. The pitching coach is relatively new. He's very, very new. And he's had a lot of help from Gabe Alvarez in terms of trying to navigate everything. And that's probably, I mean, he had 1 mound visit. I mean, there's things, little things that during the games you notice that he isn't doing. And I think he might be a little more overwhelmed. Again, that's speculation, of course, but he's at this level, Chris. I don't think helps him.
Yeah, I mean, it's his name's Juan Pimentel, I think, right? And I think he was the pitching coach in Lakeland last year. So he jumped from low A up to double A. I don't know why, what the reasoning for that is, other than the organization must really like him. I think he's good. But Dan Rickleball, who was a double A coach last year, I mean, that pitching staff was outstanding last year in just about every way. And we just mentioned at the top of the show, things have all kind of gone backwards this year. And now Rickleball's down in West Michigan. I can see, like, if you think Rickleball is better at helping guys develop and improve, maybe you do want him lower in the organization so you can get those things done earlier. But so far the results haven't been great. Now, you never know. I'm always hesitant to blame anything on a coach. I hated when everybody blamed Scott Coolbaugh for the offense last year in Detroit, because it's like, he's not a magician. He can't force everybody to suddenly hit one particular way. But in the minors, you do have to kind of speculate about it. Like, hey, is this guy not getting through to these players? Or is he not helping them prepare or getting them, improve? And so far, I mean, Erie has not looked good on the mound. Last week, this week, I guess, it was kind of more of the same. We saw, Ty Madden with 2 really below average outings. Wilmer Flores only gave up 2 runs, but he was not sharp at all. It was like 6 hits and 2 walks, only 4 strikeouts. Gibson Long couldn't get out of the 5th inning because he walked 4 guys. And then Keter Montero that was kind of the nightmare outing there, where he was like an inch away from getting out of the 2nd inning with only 1 run scored. The bases were loaded. He had balked in a run. And then he got like a little floating comebacker right to him, and it glanced off his glove and made it to shortstop, and they couldn't throw the runner out at first. You would think you get a mound visit either there or after the balk. There wasn't, and then he gave up a grand slam, and that was it. And it was like, oh, it's a bummer. It's 6 earned runs in 1 2/3 innings. He didn't pitch that poorly. He's still got some of the best stuff in the organization. He's just not. He's a guy right now who still needs to refine his command. It's kind of a Reese Olson issue where he's got stuff, but it's either too far out of the zone or in the wrong part of the zone. And you'd hope that a pitching coach, like we see Chris Fetter, comes out to the mound like 8 times a game. Like, he is a very active pitching coach. And I don't know, maybe they need a little bit more of that in Erie. But then there's Brant Herter, who just Just doesn't seem to be bothered. Just keeps going and putting up zeros for some reason.
Yeah, and he's again he's an exception to the rule because he's been probably Erie's best starter the entire season. And one of the things that plays up for him very well is there starts where he might not get a lot of strikeouts, but he does keep. There's no walks. I mean, he has been able to limit that pretty well, comparatively speaking, to some of the other Erie starters like Madden. Again, Madden over his 2 starts. I don't know what happened. Maybe it's ever since that first start where we were just like jaw dropped on that first start. It's been that way. But as far as even the bullpen goes, Billy Lesnar, like another good, he's only been out one time this week or a couple, 1/3 inning. But after getting roughed up, he's been pitching better. But they're putting out Bryce Tastelin out there, and he's been getting rocked. So this is where it's like I feel like even like what I find the regression too is like guys like Adam Wolf, who I thought, we were talking about this, that he had an outside chance to potentially make the team out of spring training. And now he's back to that almost, I don't want to say afterthought because that sounds really,
no.
But
he was so good last August and into September. That it looked like he was the guy who would figure some things out, and it's just been tough this year. I mean, that's kind of what we mean. Like, something's going on where they're not able to fix their problems as quickly as they need to, and everything just kind of snowballs, and it's been rough all year. And you have to think if Erie had had any kind of middling pitching, they'd be kind of running away with their division because the offense has been pretty solid since over a month strong now. And it's just, but maybe they'll figure some things out here over the next few weeks. There's certainly enough arm talent there. It's to the point for me where I wonder if Herder might get called up to Toledo, given that Toledo starters have not been good and Herder just keeps putting up zeros. And it's funny. He's just not impressive to watch, I guess, is the best way to put it. It's a low 90s fastball. He'll flash you a plus slider or above average slider, I should say, and like a solid average changeup. And he alternates between like hitting the corners and then throwing a ball like 4 feet out of the zone. You're like, what's going on? And he's always like looking down at his landing spot, like, hey, what happened? But yet he gets ground balls when he needs to. He doesn't get hit terribly hard when he's staying on the edges. And he's a guy who's just, I don't know, he's gonna be a big leaguer, I think. I still don't really know what role ultimately, but the more he succeeds as a starter, the more confidence I have that he can at least give that a try in the big leagues. So that's been good. But again, like, he's been so good that he might have to go to Toledo. The only other player I wanted to mention from this past week is Dylan Dingler, who, everybody, he was on such a streak there in rehab in Lakeland in that first week back in Bowie. And he's just kind of back to being who he was before, which is really unfortunate. He went 1 for 20 last week with 5 walks and 10 strikeouts. And that kind of goes along with, fortunately for Dingler, he's still a very good catcher, so he's going to play a lot. But he's kind of in that same boat as Workman and Cabrera a little bit, where it's like, man, why can't we get more consistency out of this bat? He'll look like he's an all-star, and then he'll spend a week swinging under fastballs and over breaking balls and seemingly making no adjustments.
Yeah.
Really
what was it? I think it was Thursday. They threw him 3 straight sliders. Was it Thursday or Friday? And he swung every time. And you would thought that you would recognize the first time or even the second time, but they threw him the same pitch and he couldn't do anything about it. By the way, we have a listener, Mark, chiming in on YouTube. Hi from Spain. I'm driving to work every day with your podcast. Thanks. Great job. Thank you, Mark.
We
for
thought
listening via España.
Didn't you find you saw some people in Spain?
Yeah, so I was looking at some of the analytics. I'm like, wow, we have some listeners in Spain. So I thought maybe it was my cousins because I have cousins just live outside Madrid, and then I have some friends of the family live in Toledo. So I thought maybe it was them. But Mark, man, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so my mother was born in Plaza de la Toros. Maybe it's a town where there's no bull. The head of the bull's off the. Anyway, I have a whole bunch of. I wasn't expecting Spanish or discussion of my España. But Mark, thank you for listening. We appreciate it. But yeah, getting back to Dingler, Chris. Sometimes he looks like he just in terms of even like a hulking presence at the plate.
Yeah, it's to the point where like when he's on one of those streaks, like he also is just like incredibly clutch. You're like, okay, he's coming up in the 8th inning or 9th inning. He's going to do something that's going to help him win the game. But then like, he came up. He had a big opportunity last night in the 8th inning, I think, and I want to say struck out on 4 pitches. It was like they were down 8-6 or 10-8 or whatever the final score ended up being. 2 men on. He was the potential go-ahead run, and it was just a completely non-competitive at bat. And it's really frustrating. Baseball's very hard. Nobody has to work harder than catchers, although I think he was the DH yesterday. But it's I don't know. Anybody celebrating Dingler as taking that next step forward, I think is you just gotta slow your roll, man, because he's a lot like Jake Rogers, honestly. There's a lot of it's a lot of defensive ability and offensive promise, but not nearly enough consistency.
Yeah, and that's where you bring up a good point about how Jake Rogers, you have to kind of, it wasn't until he made those swing adjustments for his front feet where it became better as a hitter. And he still has some ways to go, but I don't know, Chris. I think that when he was having a good weekend, I was just almost like, at the same time, when Tiger fans were like, bring him up to Toledo. And so, well, I mean, you have Knapp, you have Proparski, you have quite a bit up there. And I think you need the reason why AJ Hinch talked to him and was like, hey, this is what you need to do to get to this level. And so I think that whatever the discussion was had down in spring training is still sticking with him. So this is a guy also still trying to get healthy from a right tear meniscus, but still, it's the same thing we saw last year on the Golden Superpearl game, where it's just like it's almost like I pitch selection. He just suddenly lapses into bad habits or something. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, it's baseball's very hard. It's very hard to stay consistent. It's just it's unfortunate. I was really hoping that he would take that next step, but the last couple of weeks have been rough. Maybe he'll turn it around. Last year he had some kind of wild home road splits, so maybe we'll see that again. But yeah, I'm gonna move on to
West Michigan. Yeah, just as a heads up though, Erie is a game, or just still is a half a game back of Richmond in the Southwest Division with the run differential of -16. So they, in terms of offense, they lead the Eastern League in most runs scored. So again, if you imagine them having a few good starts, I think Erie would be unstoppable right now in the division, or excuse me, in the Eastern League, because the rest of the Eastern League in that division is it's like just all those teams are within a game.
Yeah, it's remarkably clustered. It's like, everybody but Bowie is really close. Like Altoona, Harrisburg, they're all within, like you said, a game or two. So yeah, it'll be a fun pennant race, but just get some pitching. That's where the regression of guys like Chance Kirby and Adam Wolf really hurts, because those guys were huge for them last year to make the playoffs down in the second half, and just haven't had it from them this year, and it's a bummer.
Yeah, it's a bummer. So move on to West Michigan, and they're 3 games back after playing the Great Lakes Loons in a series where we saw a lot of interesting offensive numbers too, because at one point the Great Lakes, I think, scored 16 runs on them at one point. I think it was.
Boy, I don't remember which. There was a 10-0 win. There was an 11-10 game in the first game of the series. There's a lot of offense there in Midland. That was just a rough week. That, like you mentioned earlier, that Great Lakes team is probably the best they'll see all year. It's the Dodgers farm system, so not only do they have good prospects, but they have these randos who you don't think are, prospects, and then a couple of years they'll be in the majors. Like Austin Gauthier, I think, is like the second best hitter in all minor league baseball this year. He's a 24-year-old in high A, but they were. And it was just a tough series, because they had a great chance to split it. I mentioned that there was that 11-10 win on the first game of the week, which was a wild one, super fun. That was when Pacheco hit a bomb to center. Campos hit that bomb right down the line. They kept coming back and eventually won. But the backbreaker was Friday night, I think. And I was texting you while this was going on, or at least earlier, where Garrett Burhan had a great start. Got it up there, 5 innings, 2 hits, 1 walk, 7 strikeouts. His best start of the year. And they scored 2 runs in like the 4th or 5th inning, and they were holding strong. And then Chavez Fernander put out a huge fire in the 8th inning. It was a fire he started, but bases loaded with only 1 out, got 2 strikeouts. And then Trevin Michael, who's been really good, comes out in the 9th and walks 2 guys and then gives up a 3-run walk-off homer. And it was just super deflating. If they win that game, it's a 3-3 split, and I think they're still within striking distance of Great Lake. But I mean, 3 games behind is still striking distance, but it's just tough, when you have a 4-2 or 2-4 head-to-head loss in a series.
Yeah, and kind of overshadows a little bit the somewhat of a strong pitching performance by some of the starters this week, except for Carlos Pena struggled. I mean, it was his first bad start of the year, 3 innings, 5 runs on 6 hits. He did strike out 5, but he, again, just kind of looked very hittable. I think it was a game. I think no, never mind. I was thinking of somebody else who this like monster shot. Jack Anderson continues to kind of regress. I'm not sure what's going on with him out of the bullpen. But Jack Olafhagen, I said his name right. Yes. 5 innings, 2nd straight week where he hasn't allowed to run. I mean, yeah, this is now 15 scoreless innings for Jack Olafhagen.
It's funny. O'Loughlin, like, you watch him and you're like, hey, it doesn't seem all that impressive. It's a little herderish, if you will. Like, he's out there and he's not dominating, but guys, like the one start he had was wild. It was like 8 hits but no runs or whatever against Lansing. But yeah, this week shut down a really good offense again. And if you look, his numbers are pretty comparable to Carlos Pena's. And he's bigger and arguably has better pure stuff and is younger. So suddenly, like, I don't know, maybe we need to pay a little bit more attention to O'Loughlin. He had a good start, and probably cut that one up and throw it up. I don't know if we have any of him on our page.
No, we do need to get some.
I'll get that one up there. But yeah, the pitching was solid. And Will Kell had a decent start. Didn't really strike anybody out. Williander Moreno.
Oh, look at that! Look at Mr. Dan Hasty, the voice of the West Michigan Whitecaps, giving us some inside information there.
Daniel Hasty.
Daniel Hasty, yeah. Look. By the way, I love that picture of Dan. By the way, look how dapper he looks in that picture. That's a great picture. Up to 96 on Saturday. That will play.
Yeah. Well, and so like there's some impressive movement there, and. Just Dan Rickleball? Is he working some magic down there? I don't know. We'll have to see. But I guess the bigger, there are a couple big things that are happening to me. Like the bullpen, like I said, Michael gave up that home run. Tyler Madison had a really rough week. Gave up like 4 or 5 walks. Gave up his 5th home run in 21 innings. He's got pretty good stuff. It's just I feel like he might be running into trouble with a lot of fastballs elevated. When hitters do catch up to him, they go a long way. It's kind of that old thing we saw with Verlander like 4 or 5 years ago, right? When he first went to the Astros.
Yeah.
But I did want to highlight Blake Halub.
I'm glad I was going to say, he has not a lot of run since April 15th.
He's, so he's kind of an interesting story because he was a 2-way player at like a D3 school in Texas. And I saw him a little bit last year when we could briefly get to see the Lakeland games, and he looked interesting. It's an interesting arm. It's like an over-the-top arm slot, mid-90s, has a little bit of natural cut to it. And one of the games when I was at West Michigan, I overheard, I think there were some like Padres farm system TrackMan guys behind me talking about his IVB. And they were like, it's like 21. It's like an elite induced vertical break on his fastball. But the big problem last year was his walks. He walked like 30 and 50 innings. It was like a 14-15% walk rate. This year, 24 strikeouts and 3 walks. And the only runs he's given up, 12 hits in 20 plus innings. Only runs he's given up are on 2 home runs. So, yeah, I mean, he's definitely somebody to keep an eye on as a reliever in the system moving forward this year. Like, it's a good arm and he's performing.
Yeah, and he's come a long way. I remember in terms of where he was. I did see him. He was one of the relievers I did see down in Lakeland when I was down there, and he's come a long way since. And so, but another person that's come a long way, and it's been a good couple weeks, is this gentleman right here. everybody's familiar. Hold on. If everybody gets this, I'll be impressed. And many must yield. We fight just like our ancestors. Right, march down the field. University of Toledo. We will fight for you. Fight, fight, fight. All right, I'm doing a terrible job.
I love that. I love when a fight song literally says "fight" like 60 times. We didn't know it was a fight. Like, hey, it's a fight song. Fight, 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 fight. Settle down, Toledo. We understand.
Well, they're just looking at it like, what else can we do? Talk about fighting. Rah, rah, rah. Yeah, that's another one. Oh, rah, rah, rah. Fight, fight, fight.
Yeah, and it's funny, but yeah, no. Chris Myers had it was basically yesterday. He had a fantastic game yesterday. 2 home runs and a double. The one home run was an absolute bomb. 469 feet, they said, 111 miles off the bat. Just out of the stadium, just disappeared. So I mean, he's having an awfully good season.
Yeah.
It's one of those situations. He's the first baseman only, I think. I don't know if he's played anywhere else. Maybe they tried him in the outfield once or twice. But it's like he and Justice Bigby are guys that are performing at a high level that probably, deserve to move up to see if they can do it at another level. But it's just there's not room for him anywhere. So, but yeah, that was pretty fun to see. And that was off the lefty too. That 469 left on left. It just murdered it.
Absolute blast. I should look for it real quick. No, and the reason, I mean, we're in Mac country, so that's the reason why I play that, because I love the Glass Bowl is one of my favorite places to see a football game. If you get a chance to go see a University of Toledo football game, go do so, because it is a fun time and the intimacy of that field is really cool. And it's because sometimes we'll have it on a Saturday night, and when they were on ESPN, and my buddy went to law school down there, and it was my first times going to a game. I think I went to a University of Toledo game before I actually went to a game at the Big House, and I still remember my first game. It was again, this is when Toledo had, I think this was days of Chester, the running back they had out of River Rouge, Chester Taylor, I think it was.
He ended up having a pretty
decent career, in the NFL. Yeah. So if you get a chance to go, that and Bowling Green too, they're really right down I-75 if you're in the southeastern Michigan area. Good places to see football. But no, and Bigby continues over the last 2 weeks. He's still hitting 400. He's still, it's a player that we're going to probably start highlighting more on our website, and I'll have to ask if we can get some quotes from him and go down there. We're going to try to hopefully go to a game this week as West Michigan is back. And
Friday seems like a good time to go.
Yes.
As we were tipped off that Troy Melton has been promoted to West Michigan and is scheduled to start on Friday night. And that seems like as good a time as any to go. He's one of the few guys, few pitchers we haven't seen in person this year. And he's an exciting arm. Maybe one of the hardest, probably the hardest throwing starting pitcher in the system, averaging 95, 96 with his fastball up to 98.
I feel bad for Lakeland's rotation because they don't really have much after that. It just kind of, after Milton left, it's like,
yeah, we're getting to that a little bit, but maybe there's some. Maybe no. Yeah, there's no.
Well, I just want to mention Isaac Pacheco, because the reason why he had a good week, 8 for 22. But the stat I wanted to look at the most is his walks and strikeouts. He had been striking out quite a bit. He wasn't walking as much, but I thought he had some really good at bats against the Loons, and I thought that overall, again, it's the little things you may not notice in the box score, but I thought Pacheco had a really good bounce back week and hitting the ball consistently. Chris.
No, absolutely, and it's one of those things you just see over the course of the season. He was so hot early at the beginning of the season, like especially in Lansing, and then it looked for a couple of weeks like he just wasn't picking up the ball very well, and he started to pick up the ball again. At least that's what it looked like this week. He was making some good takes, and then you see someone on the opposite side, like Danny Soretti, over the last couple of weeks has started to look a little bit like he's not picking up the ball terribly well. He's still doing okay, but we've seen some swings from him that you haven't seen earlier in the year. So it's just one of those up and down things. They were talking. Dan Dickerson was talking on the radio the other day with Cameron Maven, and he was talking about Riley Green and Spencer Torkelson. They were saying, I think Riley Green said, everybody goes through it. There are times where you see the ball and times when you don't. And the best hitters, they see the ball longer, and the times when they don't see the ball aren't as long. And that's basically it. And it just happens to every hitter because baseball is very, very hard. And so, yeah, it was nice to see Pacheco pick it up a little bit this week. We believe in his talent quite a bit. Still, at least he had 4 or 5 home runs this year.
Yeah.
Decent walk rate. The strikeout rate was up a little bit. I think hopefully that'll continue to come down. And yeah, he's part of the future of the organization. Probably the best defender at third base among the 3 kind of big third base prospects. Malloy, Keith, and Pacheco. Pacheco looks like he'll stick there long term for sure. So yeah, you just hope the bat keeps coming along, and definitely a nice sign of progress.
A nice, and Michael Daniel mentions we need a left-handed first baseman. Period. He ain't wrong about that. I mean, it's something the Tigers haven't done in time. But
I mean, do you like? Okay, do you really, or do you just need power hitting left-hander somewhere? Because third baseman would work just fine. If you've got a power hitting right-handed first baseman and a left-hitting third baseman, I think it's fine. Prime Cecil Fielder was doing okay at first base as a right-hander, so you just need production, right? That's what you need. I mean, maybe Keith moves there, maybe Pacheco moves there down the road, but I wouldn't force it because you need it.
Because didn't Fangraphs say they would see him at first base? Was it Fangraphs that said that?
Which one, Keith or Pacheco?
Keith.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, we came into the year talking about how I thought he was going to have to move to the outfield, and first base is always a possibility because he was so big in the AFL last year. But he slimmed down a little bit, and he has been working on his defense to the point where he's going to start at third base in the major leagues, I think. Whether he sticks there, who knows? But I think he's going to get a chance to prove he can play there. And maybe down the road he does move to first base, and you only care about the bat. Strange things happen at the big league level, right? Like Byron Buxton, probably one of the best center fielders in baseball. He's a DH now because he can't play center field without getting hurt. And his bat is so good that they're like, no more of that for you. It's like, all right, sure. So yeah, we'll see what happens down the road.
Yeah, no problem, Michael. And yeah, you bring up Darrell Evans and Norm Cash. Man, Darrell Evans, I think about his 1987 season because he had to play third because the Tigers at that point their patience ran out with Darnell Coles, and he regressed a little bit, and Sparky had to put him back at third, a position he had played since I think he was with the Giants, I think, or maybe the Braves. And he played first and third at the age of 38, 39 years old. I mean, if you look at his 87 season, he played all over the infield, wherever Sparky needed him to, and it's impressive. It's to me, it's one of the most underrated seasons of all time because, I mean, Alan Trammell's numbers indicated he should win the MVP, and we can go on. And that's a podcast show we could do all day, every day. But Darrell Evans gets he was a big reason why they won the division in '87.
Yeah, you got a 40-year-old hitting 30+ home runs and walking.
Oh, it was 40. Wow, yeah.
In '87, yeah, he's one of the great underrated players of the last 50 years or whatever. Remember we had Dan Szymborski on, I think, right? And we talked about Darrell Evans in '73 hit 40 home runs. I think Hank Aaron also hit 40 home runs that year. I may be mistaken. And then he went, or no, he hit 40 home runs in '73, and then he hit 40 home runs in '85. It wasn't that Hank Aaron did it that year, but I was asking Dan like the biggest gap between 40 home run seasons. He thought Aaron did it like 51 and like 70 or 69 or something like that. Yeah, just a remarkable career for a dude that gets plenty of love in Detroit, but outside of Detroit.
I don't think he gets enough love outside of Detroit. And Walter with a good question here on YouTube. He says, seems like everything's backlog on the hitting side because of the major league roster. For development's sake, is a change in order or they wait a month or so? I think personally they're going to wait a little longer because we've seen this happen, for example, the pitchers. Somebody was asking on Twitter the other day, why are the pitchers in Erie only throwing 4 innings? Well, mandated by the team. So in May, they changed up to 5. So who knows what they're going to do in June. So I think there's going to be certain milestones, if you will, not milestones, but maybe perhaps even like, okay, something else is going to be part of the plan. They have a big overview plan or whatever there's going to be part of it. will be included. So
Yeah, there's always development takes priority over what's going on in terms of wins and losses. But yeah, at the big league level, and we talked about it in the other show. And I don't know if this has anything to do with it, but the Super 2 threshold, which for anybody who doesn't know, that basically, big leaguers, they come up, they have 3 years of basically making the major league minimum, which is about $700,000 now, I think. And then they become arbitration eligible, and teams have control of them for 6 years. So some teams play around and keep a guy in the minors for 2-3 weeks, and then get effectively 7 years out of them for the price of 6, if you will. One of the ways that baseball or the players have tried to combat that is with the Super 2 status. So in terms of playing time, guys who come up like that, if they're in the top 22% of playing time, they get a 4th arbitration year, which could be multiple millions of dollars more down the road. And the way the teams get around that is by waiting an extra 2 months to make sure that players can't get those, be in the top 22% of playing time. And that may be what the Tigers are doing with Malloy before they send down, if they part ways with Scope or Short or whomever. But I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens. If Malloy suddenly comes up to Detroit this weekend, that's what happened. But I don't know. I think that they just are not eager to part ways with guys that are paying a decent amount of money to Scope, namely. Until, he's seemingly proven that it's not going to happen. But I don't know if they're in the business of eating his contract. But we'll see. Yeah, like if Scopes goes, then Malloy might come up, and then Keith might go to AAA, and then you'll see a bunch of movement everywhere. But if those things happen, they'll be happening in the next month or so.
Oh, so Walter, okay, I see what you're saying, Walter. You said not even think about development on the major league level, but say guys like Bigby and Myers needing to go to AA or Keith to Toledo. Look, I again, this is just me, but I think the difference, there's a small difference between AAA and AA. To me, that's just me. But I honestly think that, like, if Colt Keith goes to Toledo and continues to do the same thing, then at some point you're gonna. I don't think it could be. I don't think it'll be a September call up. I think they're gonna wait till next year. I think they're gonna give him enough reps defensively at third to see if he's a long-term solution at third base. Again, there's some. I don't know, Chris. Like, I know you see in AAA, you see those veteran pitchers who are on their last legs or their roster fodder. They're either or rehab assignments, but I don't think, if you're gonna, in terms of even like the Eastern League, for example, the Eastern League is considered a pitching friendly league, correct? Because
Eastern League is neutral.
On the ballpark, right? Or it depends on the ballpark.
Yeah, the ballparks in the Eastern League are more friendly than the Midwest League or the Florida State League, pretty across the board. But you do have more talented pitchers there. And I think the International League is pretty neutral as well.
With the exception of the teams out west.
Well, yeah,
the Pacific.
The Pacific Coast League is a little bit funky because of elevation and things like that. And there's some teams in the International League that have bandbox parks, but I think you're right. There's not a huge difference in the talent level between AA and AAA. What you see a little bit is there's just better pitching in terms of guys know how to target you and come in and control and attack your weaknesses a little bit in AAA. And some guys need to see that. Guys need to see more, 5 breaking balls in one at bat, or just no fastballs. It's just stuff like that where they're like, oh man, like these guys are going to try everything to get me out. Whereas there's still a little bit more development happening in AA. Guys are still working on their stuff, but you'll see better pure stuff in AA than you see in AAA. Just it's weird. A lot of the stuff stays about the same throughout the minors. You'll see guys in low A throwing upper 90s with a nasty breaking ball. They just can't command it and can't do it consistently enough. And that's what happens as you go up higher is guys are more consistent and they start knowing how to pitch. So Yeah, I mean, we've seen guys go straight from AA to the majors before. Cameron Maben did it. Alex Avila did it pretty successfully. So it's possible we could see something like that. But I think you're right. I think they're going to take it slow with Colt Keith. There's no real reason to rush unless, it's another month into the season and the Tigers are still competing. Maybe they're even in first place in the division and they go, you know what we could really use? A left-handed bat. You know what we have in the minors? Pretty good left-handed bat. Let's bring him up. It seems unlikely to me, but we'll see.
Well, the reason why Mason Engler, for example, can make that jump is because he was doing that in the Southern League, and that league is a notoriously hitter-friendly league. If you're dominating pitching-wise in the Southern League, that raises a couple eyebrows. I mean, if you're doing what Engler did last year, now you can see why the Tigers picked him in the Rule 5 draft. So that's where an example of a league would come into play. When somebody, like if you go in the Pacific Coast League and you're raking, like for example, Zach McKinstry was when he was at Oklahoma City for the Dodgers, you can go, well, like you always kind of go with it because of elevation of the ballparks or just even talent level wise. I mean, if a guy's posting a 7.5 ERA, 7.5 ERA in AAA Pacific Coast League, forget about it. He's, I don't know what use he would be on a major league level. Not to be rude, but it's true. But it's one of those things too where, for me, I think Walter brings up a good point about Justice Bigbie because we saw this with Ben Malgeri, Chris. I mean, you said this last month. Can Malgeri hit advanced spin? Can he do that at AA?
Yeah, and so far he's kind of staying afloat. He had a couple doubles yesterday. He's not destroying the league like he was in the Midwest League in the first few weeks of the season. But then the issue becomes the priority level of these prospects, right? Like it's one thing for guys to produce, but if they don't, the organization doesn't necessarily believe that they are high level prospects. They're the ones evaluating them. They see they talk to the managers. They know, like, here's this guy's weaknesses. We don't think it's going to work at a higher level. Then they don't view Justice Bigbie as a higher priority prospect than, say, like even like a Diego Rincones or something like that, right? Like, so they're not going to bump him up and send Rincones down or get rid of Rincones because they need players at every level. So sometimes what you do see is guys just get their way out of it. They just I'm giving you no choice. That was Kerry Carpenter last year, right? Kerry Carpenter. Now they kept him in Erie until the playoff, run was over, and then they moved him up because he had given them no choice. He was just bombing the ball to the point that like AA wasn't going to happen. And then he went to AAA and kept hitting, and they're like, well, I guess we've got no choice. Let's bring him up. Also, let's fire Avila on the same day.
Yeah.
But so yeah, like a guy like Myers, a guy like Bigbie. We like them. They're producing, but I don't think they're necessarily priority prospects to the Tigers. They'll probably move up eventually, but that's going to take a whole bunch of other moves to happen first.
Yeah. So one of the things I wanted to mention, as we head to Lakeland, one player who's been involved in Erie and we've had on the show, Max Green. Max Green is back on the comeback trail for in terms of rehabbing. Where I don't want to say where Max Green stands. I would have to give credit to James Chipman, who gave us you guys should pay attention to Max Green, and he's back from, I believe it was Tommy John, so it's good to see him pitch. But as far as Lakeland goes, they split 3-3. Again, it was one of those things where the pitching it was actually a little better than anticipated. They did have Sean Gunther, who's still doing his rehab down there, which helped. But Asano Reyes had a really good week. I mean, he went 6 for 17, batted 353, 421, and 824, with OPS over 1,000. And that was probably the most promising part. Him and Luke Gold both were productive in terms of the infield. And Jose de la Cruz, who he was on a top 25. He's now off of it. He's back, but he's making hard contact, and that's a promising thing. This was the same De La Cruz that 2 years ago we saw that was starting to come together a little bit, and then he fell off the wagon. But Chris, that was out of all the things we saw this week in Lakeland that we could see technically, De La Cruz, in talking to Sherry a little bit, she was just telling me that he had some really good at bats, and overall was actually coming back home. I thought that Lakeland had a pretty solid week.
Yeah, they won it on a walk off on Sunday. That's a fun way to cap out the week. But yeah, it's a good reminder that players take a long time, particularly some international players can take a long time to figure things out. Adenso Reyes and Jose De La Cruz both have tremendous raw power, like ridiculous 112, 113 mile an hour exit velocity at their peak. Like it's up there with anybody else in the system, but they're really raw. They're guys who struck out a ton. They don't walk a lot, but they're making some progress in that regard. I think, Reyes, just a couple walks or a couple strikeouts this week, a couple walks to go along with them with some power. That's a really good thing to see. And De La Cruz is showing kind of some of the same stuff. So yeah, it's those are promising developments from those guys. Sometimes it just takes a long time. The tools are there. It's just the feel for the game that needs to come along. So I agree with you. Those kind of two of the highlights. Luke Gold, you mentioned he did wake up a little bit with his bat this week. Unfortunately, he's now on the injured list. I don't know what happened, but that's a bummer because he's been kind of off to a slow start. And then the Max Green thing is very cool. He's one of the few players in the system remaining from the 2017 draft. It's the same draft they took Alex Faedo and Will Best, and Max Green has been slow going for him with injuries, but he's a lefty who's been up to the upper 90s, so you don't want to give up on that. And the only other the one batter I wanted to bring up is Peyton Graham. Their second round pick from last year, just 4 for 17 this week, I think, a double, a home run, 3 walks, 3 strikeouts. But it really looks like when you look at his numbers, he's not striking out a ton. He's walking a fair amount. He's got 10 steals, I think. He's got a couple home runs. But the BABIP isn't terribly high, and the average is super low. And I think he's just not strong enough. And you see it when you look at him. Like, he's capable of hitting the ball hard, but he's so skinny that it's just it's not consistent enough. And I don't know what they can do. We know that they've changed the nutrition in the system this year. It was one of the big things. But yeah,
pump it up. Yeah.
But I don't know, man. He's just so skinny. He looks like Chet Holmgren. He's just a guy that you just wonder if you can ever get any weight on him, like a Tristan McKenzie type. But I think there's some things there to be, I don't know about excited about, but that there's some indicators there that he has the ability. It's just a matter of what can you do with him physically,
right?
Because he's a 3-year college player and he's struggling to hit 200 in low A. That's not great, but everything else that he's doing suggests that he's not overmatched by strikes. He's not striking out too much and things like that. It's just, I don't know. He needs to produce a little bit more, but
you'd like to see the more of a barrel the ball up a little bit, and that's kind of something he's been lacking. But
and the one other thing I wanted to mention, I saw this. Carlos Marcano is a kid we've talked about a few times because he's only 19. He was one of the youngest pitchers in the Florida State League last year. He's repeating this year. He's got a starter's arsenal. He's just kind of a little bit undersized, but he was up to 96 yesterday. Hit 95 multiple times. He's throwing harder this year, and suddenly that makes him kind of intriguing to me. He was mostly low 90s last year with a sinker, and this year it's up to mid 90s, and that gives you something to work with. So he's a guy I think we want to keep an eye on as the rest of the season goes along to see if he can keep that velocity up, because that'll play. It's so yeah, just it's tough sledding this year in Lakeland. We've talked about it a bunch. There's not a ton of super exciting prospects just yet, but I don't know. We'll see what happens. The complex leagues start the first week of June, so just 2 weeks from now, and then we'll start to see some players get folded in. I think from there, if they have hot starts, and who knows, maybe Lakeland can take off in the second half of the year.
By the way, Jake Miller, who got bombed last week, had one of the better weeks among the relievers. 4 innings, 2 hits, 2 walks, and 6 strikeouts. So that's another encouraging sign there too, because as far as he was not missing any bats against Clearwater or Bradenton whatsoever. Yeah,
the starters that they drafted last year have by and large not been great. Joe Miller and Jake Miller, we're always going to confuse those two. They're both lefties. They haven't done a whole lot of great. You got Colt Patton, who was like the 17th rounder. He's been pitching down there. there was another Cole, the kid from Kentucky, who I don't think has started yet. I've forgotten his last name, but he was injured. Yeah, I mean, we put a video up of Garrett Apker, who was a non-drafted free agent. They signed. They got Max Alba down there, a non-drafted free agent. There's just, like you said, with Melton gone, there's not a whole lot of premium names down there. So we're just kind of waiting for some guys to pop up and maybe take a step forward.
Walter is correct. Yeah, Lakeland's going to have probably Scooble and Manning down there at some point pitching. And yeah, like I said, once the draft is over, I think we're going to try to head down there. And now I have a place to stay for a long time. I can stay down for a couple of weeks and maybe a couple of weeks. We'll see. Fingers crossed. But Cole, by the way, it's funny. I was thinking about the name Cole and for how much popular of a baby name that is, because it just seems like it's in the last 10, 20 years, it's Cole, and it's ranked as one of the top 5. So, but yeah, there will be. So speaking of that,
yeah, there it is. Eastern League Player of the Week, Colt Keith.
There it is. All right. Hold on, what is it? Where's Dan?
Exquisite.
That ball is gone. Such a all-time.
Colt
Keith, and also
that boy is good.
There you go. Yeah. So not a surprise, but that is Erie's 4th or 5th Player of the Week. We've had Cruz, we've had Workman. I feel like there was one more. Who are we missing?
I feel like we're missing.
Danny Cabrera didn't get one, did he?
No. Was it a pitcher?
They may have had a pitcher, but I thought that they've had 3 hitters, and then
it wasn't Mount Jerry.
No, I think it might have been Keith. I think Keith has had 2 weeks. now.
Oh, okay.
Maybe. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But yeah, congrats to him on another award. And yeah, Walter said he's doing them. Yeah, so far that every time the player gets the wins the Eastern League Player of the Week award, they kind of struggle after that. But
it's no
I don't know.
It's not the Madden curse, ladies and gentlemen. It is not the Madden curse. So
I don't.
Huh?
No, I mean I think Colt Keith's a good enough hitter that he's not gonna.
Yeah. He
may struggle a little bit, but he's gonna be fine in the long run.
Yeah. But, what we've seen with Colt Keith is something that okay. This might sound like I'm being extreme, but I'm not. I promise you. What we're seeing with Colt Keith is something we have not seen in the last. I mean, we could talk about Riley Green. We could talk about, but as far as infielders go, in terms of hitting with consistency, I've never seen a Tiger prospect in the last decade that's doing what Colt Keith's doing right now. Period. I mean, I can't think of any. I can't think of guys who are going up there and knowing full well that they're going to do something. I mean, the ability for him to turn up, like when we're watching that cycle earlier, he went opposite field. You notice that the hits were just like evenly distributed a little bit. And to me, that's just like, that's a pure hitter right there. And you have to, I don't know, Chris, it's one of those things where we've been, as long as we've been doing this, I mean, really looking at prospects. I mean, you've been looking at prospects longer than I have. But Chris, I can't think of anybody I've seen do this.
No, he's I mean, like you mentioned Riley Green. Yeah, it's Green-esque. Really, it's a guy that you just figure if they put the ball in the zone, he's going to do damage. And like you said, he's going to all fields. We talked to him about that. He said whenever he goes to the opposite field, it's not on purpose, it's a mistake. But it's funny to be able to hit a mistake 330 feet to the opposite field because he's done that several times. So I think he's it's a good swing plane. It's built for power and built for hard contact. I mean, the one home run he hit yesterday off the scoreboard, that thing left like a rocket. It was just like it hung up in the zone. I think it was a changeup, and he just demolished it. It almost looked like the I don't know how to describe, but like the screen paused and then just like shot off the screen like there was an error in the film. But yeah, he's a really good hitter, and it's exciting to have that. It's Double-A. The big leagues is a whole different animal, and they will find his weaknesses and exploit them. But and what we've seen from Keith historically is that he kind of struggles the first few weeks to a month when he moves up a level, generally, and then he kind of figures it out. And it mostly seems like he just gets a little bit antsy. Like he starts chasing pitches he doesn't normally chase early on, and then we saw it last year in West Michigan, or his first taste of West Michigan 2 years ago. Then last year he absolutely took off around this time of year last season before the injury. So yeah,
he's got ladies and gentlemen, he has a WRC plus of 156 right now. And think about it this way: this is about the time that injury happened in the beginning of June, was it? Or
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So right now, if you look at, so he has 216 plate. He has 169 plate appearances right now. Compared to speaking last year, we had 216 before the injury. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So he has right now a slash line 309, 379, 577 with a WRC plus of 156 through 169 plate appearances. His stats are identical right now: 9 home runs, 31 RBIs. Exact same point. And he's doing this at a higher level.
And fewer plate appearances, right?
And fewer plate appearances, Chris.
I want to say, I was trying to look at it now, but it's Fangraphs isn't coming up. But I want to say his WRC plus was 117 coming into the week. And then he just went absolutely bonkers. I mean, that's what he's capable of. So, yeah, I don't know if he keeps doing this for another couple of weeks. Again, it's gonna depend on how much Harris cares about guys playing in pennant race conditions and how much they want him at higher levels. But he's gonna be in Toledo or Detroit before too long if he keeps it like this.
Chris, his WRC plus was 114 heading this week.
114. And
And he raised to 156.
42. Yeah, 42. Well, going 13 for 24 or whatever with what was it? 7 extra base hits and 4 walks.
That will do. That will do. But my God, just insane. So
my God.
Oh my God. All right. Well, thank you. What's up? Go ahead.
Just one last thing. We don't need to do this, spend too much time on it because there's not a whole lot to talk about. But I've got we're going to start doing the draft coverage coming up because the draft college season is essentially, the regular season is essentially over, and this is where at the part now where pitchers really start to make a name for themselves with postseason performances. But so I'm starting with the outfield because the Tigers are most likely going to take an outfielder with their first pick this year, and it's arguably the best outfielder class of all time. So now that's beforehand. Hindsight, we'll probably say, nah, it didn't work out that way. But right now, you're looking at 4 of the first 5 picks are probably going to be outfielders, and a couple of them are, seemingly once every decade type hitters, and they just happen to be in the same draft. So, yeah, it's an exciting group, and then there's good depth too. So, people check for that in the next day or two.
Yeah, we'll also have, so the recap, I'll be finishing up the written recap here probably the next hour or two along with the podcast. So they'll be all embedded in one link. But if you want to go ahead and go to Tiger ML Report right now, check out the player profile that Jerry did on Eduardo Rodriguez. And so these are player profiles we're going to be adding out there more and more. Some of them will be behind the Patreon wall, which includes our StatCast article. So we'll definitely be having that hopefully caught up sometime soon. And the Trey Cruz article is up there as well. The latest Motor City Metrics podcast and more. So TigersMLReport.com. It's not just the minor leagues. We're doing Tigers all day in terms of even just to cover the big league team as well. So we'll be hitting up with the draft coverage. Check out for that. And of course, if you want to help us out on the website, of course, patreon.com/TigerManReport. Subscribe, putting some content out there. Admittedly, we have not put something out there in a week, so I apologize. But like I said, with all the extra stuff out there on our YouTube, please subscribe to our YouTube page if you haven't already. Tigers Minor League Report on YouTube, and there's a PayPal link if you want to donate a few bucks to help us out with everything. So, like for example, Friday we're going to be heading out there and looking forward to seeing Troy Melton, and I think we're going to head to Erie again here in a couple of weeks, or probably within a month or so. So there will be some roster changes that probably will happen. But thank you so much for listening. We appreciate it. For watching us on YouTube, thank you for watching. And I wanted to thank everybody who's been listening on the podcast side. We actually hit the top 200 podcasts in baseball
for the minor league pod.
For minor league pod. So I think that's pretty cool. I want to thank everybody who has supported us since day one. So again, I will say this until I can't stop saying this again. Thank you. Honestly, it's really cool. And to see Motor City Metrics right there too among that, that's just a thrill like nothing else. And so, but at any rate, we'll see you next week. We'll see you out there Friday. If you're gonna be out West Michigan, come say hi. And I might go to Toledo tomorrow, Wednesday. I'm not sure. It depends. So, Walter, thank you. Michael, thank you. Everybody on YouTube. Dan Hasty, if you're still watching, thank you. And we'll talk to you later this week.